I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. Today's painting tutorial is of this snow leopard. I'm going to be focusing more on the details of painting fur than on the rest of the painting. This painting is actually really fitting for the weather we're having here in North Texas this weekend. We got iced in, which I've actually never experienced before being from Southern California. It's really cold here right now. So this fits. I painted this on a Fredrix Convexo canvas. It's a 30-inch round canvas with beveled edges. These are great because you just paint the edges and you hang them without framing them. They have a really, really nice finished look. Because I did so much airbrushing and had a lot of fine detail on this painting, I did put one coat of gesso and I sanded it down lightly with 400 grit sandpaper to get a nice smooth surface. The great thing about these is that, like all Fredrix canvases, they're extremely archival, so you know what you paint is going to last a lifetime. I know I make a big deal about them being archival every week, but it is so important and you don't realize it until you've worked on bad canvases and had issues and had your work ruined because of the canvas itself. So that's why I'm always pushing the fact that they're archival. It's just a really, really big deal. I have new painting and drawing videos every Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow me on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with news and my newest work.
I start by painting my canvas solid gray. This way I'll only need to use black and white paint in my airbrush for the rest of the background. There's no need to mix another gray color in, I just let that gray paint show through in areas. I wanted my background to be fairly soft and blurred, or out of focus, so I painted it all with an airbrush, keeping the airbrush fairly far away from the canvas so that I did not get too much detail. First, making the lines of the trees and my branches with black paint. Next, I switched to an opaque white paint for the rest. I'll go back later with white paint and a paintbrush to fill in the foreground snow better after the earth and moon are painted in. For the earth and moon, I start by blocking in my base blue and tans for the land. My earth and moon are the only two things in this painting that will have any color. Once I block in those base colors, I switch to a smaller brush and start blocking in my cloud masses with white paint. Next, I use the airbrush with white paint to soften my cloud masses, and then black for my shadow. My video camera ate the section of me painting the moon, but it was painted the same way as I did on the moon for my lion painting last week. I filled it in with blue-gray, and then used a template with my airbrush for the texture with white and black paint. I painted my leopard solid dark gray, and then I used a white charcoal pencil to draw on the spots and other details. I start by blocking in his spots with black paint and a round brush. Next, I move between several shades of gray with highlights of white for the lighter colored fur. You can't just use one shade of gray or white and hope to achieve a realistic look, no matter how much detail you paint. If I were to paint the snow leopard in color, I would also have to add shades of blues and golds to the fur. White fur is rarely straight white. I paint my darker shades of gray first and then add lighter shades on top as I build up. You'll notice that I jump around quite a bit as I work. If you get too overwhelmed by the detail when painting fur, try to break it down into 1 square inch. Finish the detail in that small area before moving on. The direction of your fur, the length of each stroke, and how the fur clumps together is so important to getting a realistic look. The fur on the legs is going to be much shorter than the fur on the chest. Pay close attention to your reference photo. If this is the first time you're painting a specific subject, you should be spending more time looking at the detail of your reference photo than of your actual painting until you get a feel for the fur, feathers, or whatever it is that you're working on. Right now, my front paws look like cutouts against my earth and moon because of how darkly I've got the earth and moon shaded. I will go back later with the airbrush and black paint to add shadows to the paws that will push them back and make them look more like they're a part of the painting and not just floating on top. Moving on to the body and face, I again start by blocking in the black areas. The fur on the chest is much thicker. My brush strokes and clumps of the fur there are much longer now. Again, I'm adding my darker grays first and working my way up to the lighter shades. The lighter shades are painted at the tips of the clump of the fur, leaving the fur closer to the body darker. This gives the fur depth. I'm not randomly putting lines in all over the place. That is a mistake I see a lot of people make when they start painting fur. None of these lines are random. They all have to go a specific direction depending on the area of the body and how the animal is positioned. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to someone new to painting detail in fur is to slow down. Pay attention to your reference photo. So often I see students trying to rush through the detail and in turn end up with fur that is painted in like random flying confetti instead of paying attention to each clump of fur that's on their reference photo. Once you've painted a specific type of fur enough times, you're not going to need to spend so much time looking at your reference photo. In the beginning, though, it's important in learning to achieve the texture, feel, and movement of that type of fur. For the eyes, I paint in the base of the iris with a lighter gray and then let that fade up to almost black near the top of the eyelid. I paint the pupil black and then I put a highlight over that. Back to painting the fur in on the face, I again watch the direction of each brush stroke. I switched to a thinner liner brush for the hair on the face because the hair is so much shorter. For the body, I start with the black spots like I did before. My lighter hair will layer over those black spots, so I'm not so worried about the detail for those. The hair on the body, like the chest, is thicker than on the legs and the face, so I'm using a smaller filbert brush for my base layers. I also don't want this fur to be quite as detailed as on the front half of the body, keeping my focus there. Once I have my gray shades of fur blocked in, I go back with a much lighter gray and white for the highlights. Even on the body, I'm using 3 or 4 different shades of gray to build up the texture and depth of the fur. The direction of your fur here is just as important as it was everywhere else. The fur on the tail lays different than everywhere else on the body. Again, pay attention to your reference photo. Here, there are smaller clumps of fur, but they still need to be clumps, not random lines all over. Putting tons of detail into your work is pointless if that detail isn't correct. Last, I use the liner brush for the whiskers and add a few more highlights around the leopard with straight white paint. And that concludes this tutorial brought to you by Fredrix Canvases and Lachri Fine Art.